Welcome to this session, Storytelling as a Catalyst for Change. My name is Morgan Forster Ray, and I'm the Director of the Early Well Initiative at NC Child. I will introduce our speaker in just a moment, but before I do, I have some quick housekeeping and instructions for everyone. This session is completely bilingual in English and Spanish. We have a live interpreter on the line. Everyone will need to choose either the Spanish or English channel to hear audio. If you do not choose an audio channel, you will not be able to hear the presenter. To choose a channel, look for the little image of a globe and the word interpretation on the bottom right side of your Zoom screen. Click the globe icon and choose either Spanish or English. If you choose the Spanish channel, you will hear the interpreter speaking in Spanish. You will also be able to hear the English language presenters at a low volume in the background. Presenters, this is for you. Please be sure to speak slowly and clearly and take some breaks while you're talking. This will make the interpreter's job much easier. This is for everyone. We have a lot of participants in this webinar, so we will keep everyone on mute to preserve audio quality. To ask the presenters a question at any time during the presentation, please type your question into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can use the chat box for general comments or to communicate with the moderator. When the presentation is over, we may have time for more questions and answers and discussion. We'll do our best to summarize key themes and ask as many of your questions as possible. Because there are so many people here today, we may not be able to get to all the questions. Our session was recorded ahead of time, so you're about to see a video of the presentation. But Kenia, our presenter, is here live with us now. She will be able to take your questions in the Q&A box and chat with you live in the chat box throughout the presentation. Finally, our session is being recorded. The video will be available over the next week or two in both English and Spanish. We'll send you an email when all the recorded sessions are available. All right, let's get started. I'd like to introduce Kenia Thompson. She is the owner of Wordcrumbs. We will hear more about Kenia's background and this phenomenal content as we transition to the pre-recording now.
Imagine being so crippled with fear at the thought of speaking out in public that you wet your pants. This was me, about 14, 15 years old. I could not find my voice. I was sitting in class, it was probably sixth period, middle school, and I had to go to the bathroom really, really bad. And I was so afraid to raise my hand, ask the teacher permission, and then find the courage to stand up, walk in front of the class. I was so afraid to do all of these things, so much so that I risked the chance of wetting my pants. And inevitably, that is exactly what happened, causing one of the most humiliating moments in my life. Now, you're probably wondering why I told this story. Well, that was just a glimpse into one of the catalysts that kind of catapulted me into this world of public speaking and communications as a whole for my profession. Most people who knew Kenia Thompson before would probably say, oh, this girl would never have gone to school to be a reporter. She would have never been the one to teach other students how to effectively speak in public. She would never be the one in front of this camera right here, right now, presenting to you as the person that is well-versed on storytelling, as the person that is well-versed on projecting and using your voice as a powerful tool for change. But here I stand today, and I use this story to show how much stories can really impact the true agenda that you have. If you're trying to move people and you're trying to evoke change, stories truly can be a catalyst for change. And today, that's what we're going to talk about. So my name is Kenia Thompson. A lot of people have now coined me as the master communicator. Again, never would I have been this person. That little girl sitting in that seat in sixth period would not have seen herself as this person. So if you're already wondering, well, how am I supposed to tell dynamic stories? How am I supposed to advocate for the children and families of North Carolina? Do not worry. we've got you covered, and we'll talk about how you can overcome some of those things, and then also learn how to tell the stories that need to be told. But before that, let me continue on and tell you a little bit about myself, building credibility. So I got my undergraduate degree in broadcast journalism. Then I went on to get my business communications degree because I really wanted to teach these things to students and adults anywhere that I could. I've got about 20 years of experience in public relations, writing and editing, membership recruitment and marketing, education and student recruitment, public relations, print and social media, new media, and then my love is photography and videography. And we'll share later how those two things, or especially video, can be a huge component and a tool in storytelling as well. Okay, so what do we expect today? We're going to learn how to prepare for any speaking or storytelling scenario that you may be presented with. We'll learn how to identify and understand who our audience is and what they want to hear from us. And then most importantly, we'll just understand the power of storytelling. Hopefully you're starting to understand already just by that small snippet of my story that I shared in the beginning, how powerful it really can be. Okay, so when we are asked or when we want to speak to an audience, first we have to know, what are we going to be speaking about? Why are we speaking? So number one, know the assignment. What have you been tasked to do? Here, you guys are, again, advocates for families and children in North Carolina, whether that be with healthcare, whether that be with housing, whether that be with safety and security, whatever the areas are, you are being tasked and you are wanting to go out and talk to the appropriate spaces and faces about advocating for these families and these children. So before doing that, we have to know, well, who is hearing our message? Why do they want to hear this message? And then how are we going to deliver it to them? Okay, so that's understanding the audience. Once we understand that audience, we can then choose the appropriate topic. And while you say, well, my topic's always going to be the same, it might be, but the way we phrase our topics will be different. Okay. And then we'll determine what our general and specific purposes are, and we'll go into that a little bit deeper right here on this next slide. So I've got a very generic kind of grid here that's outlining topic, general purpose, specific purpose, and then central idea. Now, this might feel a little bit like English class, and I understand that, but this is very similar, actually, right? When you think about the greatest stories in history, the greatest stories that you read in English class, they all had these elements attached to them. They all had this element of understanding who the audience is, how they were phrasing and sharing their stories, and what was going to be the most appealing parts of those stories to hook you in and to get you really, really engaged into the story and the message. Okay. So when we think about our message, the message of our speech or our story or whatever presentation that we may be given contains our key ideas, right? And relevant and supporting materials. Frequently, a lot of speakers will work on the message before we work on introduction, because to me, it's almost like putting in a destination into your GPS. If you know where you're going, then you know how to start, if that makes any sense. Okay. I always tell my students and anyone that takes a storytelling class with me, figure out where you're going first, and then we can start much more effectively. So our topic here in the example is social media and its impact on society. Very broad, very general, all right? But our general purpose is to inform and inspire. We know that what we're here to do today is to inform you of something. It's to inspire you, to get you to act. We have a lot of times at the end of our speeches or our messages, a call to action. What do we want people to do? Okay, so think about that as we are creating stories. Now here, again, for the purpose of this example, the specific purpose is to educate others about the impact of social media apps. So do you see how now we are getting that funnel, that inverted funnel, really a lot more narrow into specifics of what we want our audience to understand and what we want them to get from our message. Now, here's where what we like to call the thesis, but in this case, the central idea. So social media is a powerful tool that has the potential to transform lives, but needs to be used respectfully and carefully. There are positive and negative effects of social media, and both of these affects its users. So we need to be more informed about what the responsible use of social media looks like. With this statement, there's no ambiguity. There's no confusion as to what we want our audience, our listeners, our targets to understand or take away from our message. It is very clear. So as you are crafting your stories and your messages that you want to share out with other advocates in the state, think about what is your specific purpose? What is your central idea? What do you want people to get, even if they didn't listen to anything else you had to say? This statement should give them enough to know how to proceed with you and if they want to proceed with you. Okay. All right. So when we are asked to speak or when we have opportunities to speak, there are times where we have to do some research. Okay. Wikipedia is not a good or valid source. Do some real research. Get the statistics, get the facts, understand what are the challenges facing families and children of North Carolina. How are you going to use those numbers, those statistics, those testimonies? Testimonies are huge, so let's stop there for a second. I can tell a story about someone else wetting their pants, right? I could tell a story about myself wetting my pants, completely different. I can tell a story about hypothetical situations in healthcare, but I can share Rebecca's story about her challenges with Medicaid, with obtaining the proper coverage, and it changes everything. If I can hear Rebecca's pain, if I can hear Rebecca's challenges, if I can hear her struggle, if I can hear her worry over not having adequate amounts of coverage for health, that changes the game. So think about when we are researching and preparing for our stories, not to exploit, we're not exploiting others, we're simply asking for permission to use their stories to advocate for the need of change, right? That's what we're here for. So when we use facts, facts are verifiable, they hold more weight than opinion, and they support your claim, okay? They support all the things that you say are wrong with the scenario. They support all the things you say that need to change. You may tell me, well, this needs to change, that needs to change. Well, show me the numbers. Can't really argue with numbers. So if we can use facts, if we can use testimonies, those are great. Statistics, even better. Okay, so this is where we're talking more about the numbers. Statistics inform with numbers, and when they are made relevant and understandable to an audience, statistics can startle and convince others to change, to move, to advocate. So let's say you have a nationwide statistic. And honestly, when you look at the numbers, it may not seem to impact North Carolina very much, if not at all, right? Now, what if you took that same number, let's say it was a 48% in the country kind of number, and you really took a look at, well, how does that break down in the state of North Carolina? Take that number and find how does it relate to the people who live in this state, and it could be a much more significant number. So don't stop at statistics nationwide or in just a region that may or may not impact as much as it could if you really did a little more digging to figure out and find out, how does it affect African Americans? How does it affect Caucasians? How does it affect Hispanics? How does it affect men and women? How does it affect children? Right? Don't stop at the large big picture. Let's drill it down, because that's when things really become more impactful. When people can see themselves in the situation and when they can feel the closeness or the proximity of the issue, then it becomes a concern for them. Until you make it real for other people who are not in the situations that you're advocating for, it's never going to feel important enough for them to do something about it. So you have to make people feel the problem. And feeling the problem means putting us in those shoes. So think about that story. All right, so as we analyze our audience, so we've got kind of an idea of what the message is that we want to craft, what we want to share, what we want to use as our catalyst for change. Let's think about now, who are we going to be speaking to? Are we speaking to legislators? Are we speaking to healthcare professionals? Are we speaking to educators? Who are we talking to here? And how are they going to need to hear this message? So a couple of things that we will learn in this section here is we're going to learn how to analyze the audience and tailor our speech, our messages to their wants, their needs, and their interests. Unfortunately, we live in a pretty egocentric world where everybody wants to know what's in it for me. So this is, while seems a bit manipulative, is a very important element because, again, I have to see myself in the movement. I have to see myself as part of this cause and this reason to act. We'll understand the best ways to practice for obtaining audience information and tailoring your presentation to their expectations. We'll speak with confidence, using humor, sometimes effectively, and create a personalized experience for your audience. And then we'll adjust our message to present it and encourage participation from your audience too, which is very important. All right, so let's take a little bit of a step back and let's just do a definition real quick. Demographics. When we think about demographics, what does that mean? Obviously, the demographics is what makes up our audience because this is who our people are that we're looking at and who we're analyzing, okay? So demographics tell us who our audience is and can be very useful information when making decisions about what to cover in our speeches. For example, generic example once again, if I'm talking about retirement benefits, I'll structure my message or my speech differently if I know I'm talking to an older audience who is closer to retirement age than I would to a younger audience who won't be retired for decades, okay? I just turned 39 years old. So if I am in a seminar listening to retirement options, while I know the benefit of building for my retirement, of planning for that, it still feels pretty far away, right? So my message may be, we know most of you in here are young. I'm young. Retirement doesn't feel like a real thing. Who knows if we'll even get to it? But if we don't plan for it now, we'll kick ourselves later. Something to that effect, right? That message is different. Now, if I were older, and let's say, I think what retirement age is now 66 in the state of North Carolina, I believe. Don't quote me on that. And let's say I'm 60, and I'm attending a seminar at work, and I'm really concerned about my retirement funds and what that's going to look like and how am I going to survive. So my message as the presenter is going to be different. Now, many of you may be concerned about what retirement's going to look like for you, if you can truly retire, and how you're going to be able to do that and be financially stable. Well, we've got solutions for you, right? Something to that effect. The same topic, two different audiences, two different approaches to your message, okay? So again, you may be talking about the same thing, healthcare for children, healthcare for daycare workers. But if your audience is different, your message is going to change a little bit. Still have the same outcomes, still have the same desired effects, but your delivery is going to be different. So when we think about this message, this delivery, our audience, a lot of times we have scenarios that cause us trouble. And they cause us trouble because we don't think first. You know how the saying goes, think before you speak. This is such an important thing to say. Your mom or your aunt or your grandma used to tell you all the time, think before you speak. Don't put your foot in your mouth. Well, it happens a lot especially when we're so passionate about certain topics, we could use words that aren't interpreted correctly, and that could come off as a really dangerous pitfall. I call them pitfalls here. So when we consider demographics, it's really important to avoid these things. Stereotyping. Stereotypes are generalizations related to race, ethnicity, nationality, or even other groups that are not represented in your audience that you may or may not see. I always use the example of Haitians. So my family is from Haiti, both my parents. I was born here in the States. And growing up in the 90s was kind of hard because everywhere I turned, there was always some sort of documentary on voodoo practices in Haiti, how poor the country is, how uneducated we are. And it was really hard to carry that pride of being Haitian, because anytime I did let anyone know, it was, well, do you practice voodoo? How do you feel about the state of your country? All these questions that really immediately prejudged who I am, who my family is, and caused a lot of uncertainty and pain for me. So I say all that to say, imagine being the speaker at an event, at a workshop, and for some reason you are talking about third world countries or countries in the Caribbean, and you come across Haiti. And while you mean no ill will, you talk about how uneducated or how poor the country is. Okay, mind you, they are not uneducated, and yes, it is a poor country, but there's beautiful things in Haiti. Okay, but you go on and on and on to talk about this country and its people. Unless I have my purse with me, which happens to have a Haitian flag, I'm not walking around with the badge that I am from Haiti, especially if it's not a Haitian related event. So how must I feel sitting in those seats, in that audience, listening to the speaker that I may have been really excited to hear from, continuously bash a country and the people that I identify with? Now that might seem a little extreme. You're like, well, that doesn't happen, but it has happened. And it will happen. It happens in the case of race. It happens in the case of ethnicity. It happens in the case of nationality, right? Think about when 9/11 happened. Think about right now in this pandemic with COVID and how people have perceived Asians, how people have perceived Muslims, and how a lot of that subconscious thought will filter its way through our messages. Immediately, you have discarded and you have offended a group of people that did not come to be offended or discarded. So it is imperative that in our messaging, we are very, very conscious of the words that we are choosing to use, the generalizations that we may be making, and the stereotypes that we have, because we all have them, that those do not surface through the messages that we share. I always put the definition of ethnocentrism here because we all carry this. Because I am part of the culture I'm part of, right? And that culture could be many different types of things, right? It could be race, it could be nationality, but it could also be, I went to an all-women's college, Peace College, downtown Raleigh, and we're better than Meredith, right? But because I am part of a group, and we're not better than Meredith. So see how quickly those words could have been misconstrued. I had to think about what I just said. But as an example, I'm saying, because I went to Peace, I think, or we think, Peace girls, we Peace girls, are better than those Meredith girls over there down the street. Not true. But immediately, just humanistically, who we are, because we're part of a group, we always think that that group is better than the other. So we have to eradicate these thoughts and these ideas, especially when we are sending messages out, because we don't know who that message will fall onto, who those ears will hear, and who those decision makers are. that may hear that message, be offended by what you say, feel your stereotyping and your generalizations. And unfortunately, they have the power to not make the decision that you need them to make, simply because of word usage and choices. So that was a bit of a tangent, but I always kind of sit here with this topic because I think it is so important, because I've heard so many people say the wrong things in their messages. And all it takes is just a simple switching of words and thoughts, rephrasing, just so that someone does not potentially take it the wrong way. Now, people will ask me, well, Kenia, I can't make everyone happy. How do I not offend someone? Unfortunately, we will always somehow, some way offend someone. I hope I haven't offended you by now, but there is a potential that I could have, right? So we can't control that part of it, but what we can control is being the best that we can be in the messages that we send out, and being as fair and unjudgmental as possible through those messages. That's all we can give, is respect, honestly. And this is what we call our ethical responsibility with our messages and with the stories that we tell. All right, so how do we connect with our audience, especially virtually, right? This is hard for me. This is hard. I'm usually in front of a classroom, on a stage, in a room, workshopping. This is different. This is really different. And so, COVID I think has beauty and ugliness in it, obviously. And the beauty is it's now really stretched us and challenged us to find new creative ways to engage as much as possible. So for me, the most effective thing has been, again, storytelling, getting personal. Some people say, can you get a little too personal? Well, I think that's just the way we can connect. Because if I'm not vulnerable, if I don't show you who I am, if I don't show you that I'm willing to give you a little bit of my heart, right, a little bit of my compassion, then I can't expect for you to do the same with me. So for me, getting personal with examples, with stories, sharing stories of other people that have given me permission to share stories, those are great ways for me to build relationships. And I think that that's one thing that people forget in the storytelling game, that it's not always about getting the client or getting the support, but it's about building relationships. The more vulnerable we become, the more people trust us, and the more vulnerable they'll become with us. So remember that. Don't be afraid to tell those stories. I know a lot of times you do have to get comfortable and okay in a space to be able to share certain things. I'll be honest, I didn't share that story of wetting my pants until about 2 years ago now, actually at the very beginning of the pandemic. We were sitting in the studio and I thought, it's time. It's time. And what better time now when we are all just searching for little moments of personal connection? It's time to share it. I was embarrassed to share that story. But I'll tell you something. The minute I shared it, the amount of people who messaged me, who called me and said, Kenia, the same thing or something similar happened to me, or I am so afraid to speak in public, or I'm terrified of getting up in front of a crowd. So many people, I didn't feel alone anymore. So just the beauty of that one story provided connection, provided opportunity. The next, encourage participation. So I know here, we're pre-recorded. I will be coming on live after this. But let's say this was a live workshop where I was talking to you live at this moment right now, encouraging participation. Everyone put a 1 in the comments if you've experienced this, or if you find this atrocious, right? If you think that children in North Carolina should have free healthcare, right? Finding ways to engage and participate with your audience is amazing, because it lets them feel like they're part of it. They're part of the message. They're part of the experience that they're having. Examine situational characteristics, meaning not every situation is going to be the same. I can give you a roadmap of what to do and what not to do. But my kids may come down here right now and open the door, and I've got to readjust. Or something may happen virtually. My internet may go out. You may get interrupted. You may have a question that throws your whole script off plan. Those things are okay. But we have to remember that part of that organic storytelling is also learning how to connect things too. Connecting them back to the main purpose of why we're here and why we're talking, why we're telling these stories. Why is this message important? So never lose sight of that, even if situation changes. Learn as you go. It only gets better if you keep doing it. So if the first time you tell a story, you bombed it, it's okay. It's all right. Take notes for yourself. What did I do wrong? Or what could I have done better? Let's say that. What could I have done better? What did I do great? How did my audience engage with me? Right? What is the feedback? It's always okay to ask your audience, even if it's just one person. What's some feedback that you have for me as I go into the space of advocacy, as I want to, talk to more people? What are some things that you would have loved to have heard? What would have gotten your attention? Those questions are okay to ask. Number 5 is really important. And there is an order to this, right? So number 5 is get to the point quickly. Meaning, at the very beginning, tell people why they're here. Get that hook in. The hook is the story. The hook is the reason why. And then take a step back and go through the journey of the statistics, the reasons, more stories, what they can do, and then remind them again of why we're here. Never leave your audience waiting to understand what you're talking about. Okay. Always make sure that at the beginning, within that first 2 to 3 minutes, depending on how long you have to speak or present, that they know what they're here for. 6, have confidence. Okay. Remember, you are the expert. You are the storyteller. You are the messenger. You are the person that they are here to hear. So don't cower. Don't be afraid. You are the expert. Be of the people, not above the people. This is my favorite one. Never act like we are better than. I am just like you. I have been in your seat. I have been in your shoes, right? When I teach my public speaking class, I tell my students, I know exactly how it feels. It's funny because I teach at Peace now, right? And I will tell my students, I used to sit in this seat, in this very seat. I know what it was like to be afraid to give your speech and to deliver your speeches. I get it. But look at what I'm doing now. I still have moments of fear, but I was just like you. So when we talk to people, we're giving them our messages. We have to almost create this even playing field. Whether that's making them like the people we're advocating for, or making the people we're advocating for like them. We have to find some parallels there. Again, bringing the viewer's point of view in those shoes that we're looking to change the lives of. We are one paycheck away from not being able to have health care, right? We are one situation away from X, Y, and Z. No matter what our lives look like today. Shoot, with the gas prices the way they are, I think we can all feel the pain of financial strife, of what it might mean if one thing was taken away from us and how that could change everything, right? Last one here is use humor appropriately. And I'm not a very funny person. I mean, I don't think I am. I like to tell jokes. I don't know if they're very funny, but I use them, especially with the younger crowds, because I just want them to laugh at me, get them really comfortable, get them to feel like I'm laid back. I'm not going to be a hard instructor or teacher or workshop facilitator, but I really am here to have them enjoy the moment. Now, with you guys, not every situation is going to call for humor. And I think that it's also very important to recognize when humor could be taken offensively, right? So again, that's why I put here, use it appropriately. If it does not find space in your message, don't use it. But if you are effective at humor, it can be an effective tool to use depending on how it's positioned. Audience analysis takes time and effort, but it is energy well spent. Being audience-centered and adapting to the audience's needs are critical factors in creating effective presentations and messages. So anytime you are asked or you know that you're going to speak to a certain audience, do your research. Who's going to be in the crowd? If it's one person, what do they do? What do they advocate for? What do they love to do in their spare time? If you're privy to this kind of information. Some people are like, well, how do I find that out? We've got Google at our fingertips. We can find out a lot about people these days. And the most effective thing to do is to slip in personal anecdotes in a message to the person that you are delivering to you're talking to the people, to the groups that you're talking to, because immediately they feel like you know them. They feel like they can be trusted with your voice and your message in their time, in that time together. Okay. All right. So let's go on to the power of storytelling. Here is where I'm hoping that we will be able to come off camera for a little bit and have some Q&A and opportunity to share some ideas of stories of how we can leverage messages that we are thinking of. But before we do that, let's talk about what storytelling is. So storytelling gives us an opportunity to express vulnerability, like I mentioned before, transparency and relatability to an audience. In turn, our audience learns from our experiences, and it can shape or strengthen or challenge their opinions, values, and emotional connection. That is one thing that we really want to use stories for, is to challenge people's thoughts. A lot of times we're very set in our ways, and we believe what is true is true. Our truths are our truths until someone comes with a challenge. Until someone comes with enough statistics, enough testimonial, enough facts, enough evidence to make me say, well, I wonder if what I believe is really what I should believe. I wonder if what I'm advocating for is really what I should be advocating for, right? This is the opportunity that we give other people to, again, see themselves in our stories. Everyone has a story. Even the people that seem to be the hardest to change their mindsets and their ideas, they have a story that can likely resonate with yours. So the question is, are you going to be that much of an influencing storyteller to be able to allow them to see themselves in your story? So here's a story that I have, another one. This one's a fuller story, and it is a little bit about my Haitian upbringing. So I want to share this story with you, and we'll talk about it, hopefully together, in our Q&A section. I'll see you soon. Why do you talk like that? You sound like a white girl. What? I heard this more times than I could count growing up. I was never Black enough, and I was too Black to fit in anywhere else. The only time I felt like I belonged was when I was with my Haitian family. Growing up, all I knew how to be was the child of 2 Haitian parents, and I loved it. Sure, my dad was a little more strict than my friends' dads, but there was nothing compared to the foods we ate, the compa music we listened to, and the love I experienced from my huge circle of uncles, aunts, grandparents, and cousins. Our house was Little Haiti, smack dab in the middle of Raleigh, North Carolina, and I fit right in until I stepped out. I didn't understand what it meant to be African American. I tried, but it wasn't the same. And every time I tried to empathize, I was told that I just didn't understand. And I guess I didn't. I came from a family who were proud to be Black, coming from a nation that was the first Black nation to free themselves from slavery. So growing up in the South, where slavery and racism were very sensitive topics, it was hard to navigate. It was hard to be proud of where I came from, while also maintaining empathy for those that I looked just like. As a result, I grew up very quiet. I felt misunderstood and experienced some forms of identity crisis. I wanted to fit in so badly. I wanted to detach myself from the culture I loved because no one could understand my core. And mix this with what media told us about Haiti in the early 1990s, it caused my regression to deepen. I immersed myself in books and created my own worlds where my Caribbean flavor was a desired trait to have, where speaking broken French was sexy and not seen as uneducated. A world where I could brand my possessions with my country's flag without embarrassment of what other people might think. I spoke freely in this world. My voice was loud and strong in both English and in Creole. Sac passe, or what's up? I said them both proudly. In this world, Kenia was beautiful. In this world, Kenia was smart. In this world, Kenia could do anything. But then I put the books down. I laid my pen to the side, and I reemerged into a world that had such difficulty accepting Kenia. I reemerged into a world where I walked around mute, screaming inside to be set free.
Wow, I think I echo what Fawn shared in the chat around having chills. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Kenya. We have about 15 minutes or so. Would love to open it up for questions. I see that we have had 2 submitted so far. As a reminder to submit your questions, you just want to do that in the Q&A box. We will start with our first question from Jasmine. And Kenya, this is really about how do we share stories that are compelling when there's different audiences and different stakeholders. And I think a lot of people on this call probably relate to that. We might be presenting to a group that has politicians in it, parents, various stakeholders. So how do we really go about curtailing a message to those audiences?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I think honestly, we're overthinking the answer. For me, the answer would simply to be recognize the fact that one topic, one issue, one concern has brought all of these different people together in one space, right? Identify the fact that there's so many different people of different walks of life, different purposes, different objectives here in this one room for one thing. We all want the same thing. And really, once you identify the fact that everyone wants the same thing, or they're here enough to want to explore the same topic to figure out how we can come to one accord as best as possible, that unifies people, right? Because if you look at it as we all have different thoughts and opinions, and we all, have different experiences, which we do, but if you start to separate people, then they start to think in their own silos. But when you unify the concept of whether you think you agree with it or not, whether you see what I'm saying or not, we're all here for the same thing. And so if we kind of start by, again, bringing people together, making them feel like there's no difference among us, then the conversation can start to happen because those walls come down.
I love that. It reminded me of the part around knowing where you want to go, but not necessarily like the end message there and that unifying front. I really love that.
Exactly.
Our second question from Kara, I believe, is when we look at our own biases and stereotypes within speeches, do we also look at the ones that exist in our audience? How do we overcome those stereotypes or ethnocentrisms that our audience may have when we are all talking about the well-being of children?
Yeah. So yes, you should always acknowledge the biases and the stereotypes that your audience may have. You should never assume because they may or may not have them, but you can say some common stereotypes or biases are these. You may or may not resonate with them. And I think that, again, if we use stories to portray the fact that anyone could experience these things. Like most people have children, or they have nieces and nephews, or they have grandchildren, that they could somehow see those kids, and sorry, I keep getting out of focus, see those kids in the children that we're advocating for, or the family that we're advocating for. We can see those kids in our kids. I mean, if you can't feel them, then I don't know, right? I almost feel like I don't know what we can do from there, because to me, not that you guys have the easiest jobs, but when we talk about babies and children, you'd have to have a really hard heart not to be able to empathize and have compassion for stories that involve the plight of these young human beings. So, I know a lot of the things you guys advocate for are difficult, but if we find the stories that really hit home and resonate, I think that that's probably the best way to break those stereotypes down.
Awesome. Thank you. One other question here. Can you share any real tips of how to overcome stage fright in talking to the media?
Yeah, practice. I know people are like, really, I just have to keep talking to get better at it. Yes, you have to keep talking to get better at it. This is the biggest thing that students 18 to 25, adults 35 to 65, my kids, this is the biggest issue that everyone has, and that's really just the fear of doing this. If you take yourself out of your head and realize that everyone else is just as nervous, or everyone else has the same exact apprehensions pretty much, unless, again, we've been doing it all the time. I still get nervous though. If it's really important to me, I still get very nervous. If I'm concerned about, you know, how effective I'm going to be, or if I'm just really, what's the word I'm looking for? If I care about something, it's going to make me energized in a way that may cause nervousness. So that's also important to recognize. Is it actually nerves, or is it passion? Because passion sometimes will make us have the same feelings of nervousness. I always say, before you go on camera, before you go on stage, take some deep breaths. I say tongue twisters because, and this is weird, but I say tongue twisters because tongue twisters will loosen up the muscles in your jaw. I don't know for you, but sometimes if I haven't spoken yet really in the morning, and I'm going on first thing like 9:30 in the morning, I may still be tired from being asleep. My muscles haven't really worked themselves out yet. So I'll do something kind of silly with my mouth to help loosen it up. And then it also brings the endorphins to your brain that causes this relaxation and more of a euphoria kind of feeling. So practice is number one, because no matter how many tongue twisters I do, if I didn't practice beforehand, or if I didn't know my stuff, it doesn't matter, right? So practice is key. Number one, know your content. Don't ever get caught without really having some sort of answer. If you don't know the answer, it's okay to say you don't know, but then also provide some sort of resource or supplemental information to that. So be prepared. And then also just relax as much as possible. Create an environment and a space that promotes tranquility and relaxation, so that you don't feel additional pressure on top of what's already there in front of you.
And one more to kind of go in this vein. What are your thoughts on the groups like Toastmasters?
Mhm. So I think Toastmasters is great. I don't know if I don't want to pitch my services, but I have my own public speaking program. So, it's kind of hard for me I created it actually because I took Toastmasters and I didn't feel like it benefited me. No shade to anyone who has taken Toastmasters, because clearly they have a model that works for a lot of people. Okay. I think you need to go into a space that really caters to your personal needs. And I don't know that sometimes Toastmasters allows a lot of time for that. But if you are, already in that vein of speaking, and you just really want to perfect those skills, and I think it's a great service. If you're looking to really work internally on some of the areas of anxiety or trauma, right? Like my situation was traumatic. My family upbringing was traumatic. So I always say, trauma in conversation births that anxiety. And so when we don't deal with the trauma in conversation, then we aren't effective public speakers. So just depends on what your goal is.
That's really helpful. And Fawn is including some information in the chat that people can get more information about
Okay.
Kenya's
Thank you, Fawn.
storytelling and group. All right, so we're going to transition to a topic around ethically, right? So how do we share stories? Um, and what are some guidelines to follow around ethically sharing stories of others? Can you talk about obtaining consent, staying in touch? What is out of bounds? What do we need to be sure to talk about up front before sharing someone's story? So,
Yeah.
5 questions in one, but I think you
No,
got the topic there.
it's a great question. I've worked with so many nonprofit organizations, NC Child being one of the primary ones, where we tell a lot of very sensitive stories. These are stories that I'm crying behind the camera because they're real, they're raw, and they're true. Before we ever, though, start with this scenario in front of the camera, we talk to them about what the story is, what our objectives are, outline that in some sort of document where they agree to being to sharing their story for this purpose. Now, with that said, someone who shares their story always has the what's the word I'm looking for? Has the luxury of being able to say, I don't want to tell that story anymore. I saw the video, so let me take a step back. They've recorded it. We had their permission, show them the video. It's one thing to say it, it's a whole nother thing to see yourself on camera or to read an article or transcript of that interview. Sometimes they say, oh, I didn't mean to say that. Can we take that out? Yes, we can take that out. Can we edit this out? Yes, we can edit this out. Or, you know what? I just don't feel comfortable anymore. It is not our story to tell. It's not our stories to take liberties with. And they control the narrative. So, this is almost a gift that they're giving to us to be able to advocate for them and for people like them. And so we don't want to abuse that. We want people to trust us. Remember, trust is a major thing in this storytelling element of the work that you're doing. And so if people can't trust that you're going to take care of their story like it were their baby, then they're not going to want to continue and the word will spread, trust me. And so getting that consent after it's been recorded or written, allowing them to see the transcription or the video, and then giving them the grace to be able to bow out if they feel like they no longer want to share it, or giving them the option to edit the content. I think that that's the most ethical way to go about it. Being transparent in all elements of the process so that they feel comfortable and knowing and trusting you with the story.
Thank you. I think we have time for at least one more. There was a comment in the chat from Mebin, just really pointing out that it can be difficult for people to see the connection between children's well-being and their parents' well-being. Do you have any thoughts on how to help people make those connections around children and parents and families that they reside in?
Yeah. That's a hard question. For me, I always link back to, and I hate to continue to talk about trauma, but trauma forms so much of our life experiences. And when you look at adults now and what they're going through, it's all linked to something that's happened in childhood at some point, sometime. Decisions, scenarios, current situations, just the paths that we take are based off of what's happened to us. So I think if we can just go down to that foundational element of we're all that kid inside, so why not prevent them from going through what you've gone through if we can, right? That a lot of times I feel gets adults who are like, that's so far removed from where I am today, or that doesn't bother me anymore, which they're ignoring the fact that it does. That brings up things. And I would say, be prepared that a lot of these storytelling sessions or conversations may bring up a lot of emotion for people, especially if you do it right. I don't mean to make people cry when I help tell stories, But I think that's honestly the best way to release that emotion and connect with the purpose. And so, be prepared to be empathic enough to understand that inner child in an adult that you're really trying to reach. And remember what I said about not always making the sale or getting someone to sign on the dotted line. It's about building relationships. And so when we talk to those types of people that may not connect, build a relationship first. Build, kind of break down the walls of maybe mistrust, or again, that trauma block that they've put up, to help them identify with that child that we're trying to advocate for. Hopefully that answered the question.
I think so. That was great. I think we have time for just one more. So we will round it out with watching for pitfalls, right? So this topic, are there any suggestions you have for how we can check our language to know whether we are unintentionally reinforcing stereotypes?
Yeah, I think the best way is, so we can't communicate effectively alone. Cannot, right? So anytime I have a speech or something that I'm delivering or new content that I've never shared before, I share it with all my circle of friends and family. And I tell them, be as blunt as you can be with me. Can you understand it? Could someone take offense of this? And I have I'm proud to say that I have a very diverse group of friends. And so, I've got people from all walks of life that I will share things with so that they can let me know if I'm potentially being stereotypical or offensive in an area. Now, remember, you can't avoid offending someone someday, somewhere. You can't. But if you come with a pure heart and you come with good intentions, even when I said that Meredith comment, immediately I was like, oh crap, someone from Meredith's probably going to be in the audience and they're going to think those Peace Girls once again are bashing us. And I wasn't. It was just the way I said it. Clearly, it was the way I said it, but my intentions were pure. But even if so, you saw how I corrected myself. I didn't decide to re-record. That was a true, authentic moment of, it's okay, because what if it were live and it happened? I have to correct myself in the moment, not bash myself or pound myself about it, but just clearly use it to my advantage, because I was saying, I was giving you a tip that I clearly demonstrated effectively by saying the wrong thing. And I recognized it, I identified it. And that, I asked for forgiveness if anyone did take it offensively, and this expressed the fact that that wasn't my intention. And so I think that those moments are okay. Again, those moments show that we're human, that we're not trying to put on a mask, that we aren't, the camera is not this glitz and gloss that's, causing us to not have true personas. We are real people, and things like that do happen. But trying our best, like again beforehand, allowing others to listen to our speeches or messages or videos that we create, just so that we can be sure that there may not be any of those pitfalls. And then if it does happen, because it likely will at some point for you, identify it quickly as possible and, express your regret or apologies in that moment.
I love that. Well, I think we are just at time. Kenya, thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank
There is
you.
lots of love and shout outs for you in the chat box. I
Yay.
think Fawn also included your website, or sorry, Margot.
So, crazy story. My website just completely crashed about a month ago. So I have to check on that. If you do follow me on LinkedIn, Kenia, I think it's Kenia Thompson, or Wordcrumbs on Instagram or Facebook, there's a link to my next course if you want to, or just,
Awesome.
message me. So yes.
All right. Well, people know how to get in contact. Thank you everyone for coming to our session.
Thank
Have a great
you.
rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.